Here are a couple screenshots from a tool and a resource I'm going to share with you guys, but I put together some questions that I think would work well for the boots position based on proactive, integrity, and ownership. And I need like binoculars to see this. But I'm going to read through it because the words actually really matter here. So for proactive, the question I came up with was, tell me about a time that you needed help and had to request it from a colleague. Describe the communication you had requesting support. So I really want to know what that message looks like. And a good response is they provide a summary of the situation with background information required to allow the colleague to quickly give an answer. Maybe they even provide, actually not maybe, and they provided like a link to the problem and potential solutions. So they really went above and beyond. A moderate response is providing some background information with the situation, but really no suggested solution. So like that's what like a reasonable person should do. And a bad response would be like, hey, I need help over here. And like not really give you the background or enough information to like even try to answer it the first time. For integrity, the question was, tell me about a time you noticed that you made a mistake or an unintended consequence occurred due to your actions within your role or responsibilities. A good response is, I made XYZ error and I acknowledged that to my superior or team, and I suggested a way to prevent it from happening again. So that last part is kind of proactivity mixed into this, but really the question is about integrity. So the difference between a good response and a moderate, where a moderate is, I changed the process to make sure it didn't happen again, but they didn't necessarily acknowledge it publicly. There were a couple of answers when I asked people about these core values where, you know, they would make a mistake, they would break something, they would fix it and then own up to it. And it wouldn't be like, oh, I noticed on the cameras that somebody that my boots on the ground backed into a door, right? And it's not like they fixed it and hid it. They fixed it and said, hey, sorry, I backed into this door, it fixed it, it's better now, you know? So that's the difference. And with this question, I'd be, a good follow-up here is to figure out, sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, you know, and I talked to my boss about it. Ask them how their boss found out that they made that mistake. Because sometimes they'll be like, oh, they noticed it in the KPIs, or they noticed it when doing call reviews or whatever, right? So if they acknowledge it, but somebody found it out, it's not like that's extreme level of integrity. It's, you know, they're owning it, which is good. But what I'm really looking for is like they told their supervisor when they didn't have to. And then a bad response is like blaming somebody else or not suggesting to fix it or update a process or just kind of hoping nobody would notice. And you'll get that stuff in interviews where you're like, why are you telling me this? So the last one I have is for ownership. Tell me about a time where you recognized a process was inefficient or not working. And I was careful here not to say your process, because I think ownership means taking ownership of the entire thing, even if it's not directly within your responsibilities. So a good response here is, you know, describing a situation in detail, describing step by step how and why they needed to fix it, and the steps that they took to have it fixed, you know, basically improving the process without being prompted. Moderate response is saying something like, oh, I noticed a problem, and then I requested somebody else change it, but they didn't really provide a solution or personally improve it. And a bad response is like, yeah, it was really frustrating that process didn't work. They're not really taking any ownership of the thing. So I think it really comes down to the quality of the interview. If you held the interview and you know what you're looking for as far as answers go, and you know which questions you're gonna ask, and they're just not showing up, you gotta, I think, pass on that. Because it's not gonna be different when you get them on the team. They're gonna show up the same. So I would say that. I think if they're not so good on paper, but they do great in an interview, I think, again, it depends what do you mean not so good on paper. Like, did they have like a crappy Word document? Then like, I might not care if it's a sales rep who doesn't need to have attention to detail. Like if they had like a sloppy looking resume that wasn't like beautiful. If it's a transaction coordinator and their resume is not like every I's dotted and T's crossed and that thing's like beautiful, that's probably gonna be a deal breaker. So it really depends on like the role and kind of what I'm looking for. That's almost more of the behavioral fit side of things. But yeah, I'd be cautious of an interview that didn't go well.